Hello and welcome to the Leave, Laugh, Love podcast. We're your hosts, Evelyn and Veronica. This is a podcast where we talk about life after high-demand religion. When we were deconstructing, there weren't a lot of resources about the crazy kind of Catholicism we found ourselves in, so we decided to be a resource for others in that place. We may have left the church, but we're still laughing and loving. No matter where you're at with your faith, we're so happy you're here today. Hello and welcome. Today, Veronica's going to be giving us a little bit of an overview of a case you may have heard of that's hitting the Supreme Court. The oral arguments will be
October 7th.
Occurring shortly after we're recording this, but probably before this is released. So I'm excited for Veronica to kind of give us a deep dive in a very comprehensive way so you can have a little bit of an understanding of what's going on. And before we get into all of that, welcome to Small Group.
Thank you.
What is your rose and thorn, Veronica?
My rose is probably that I'm starting full-time hours at my job this week when I get back from this trip. So I think it was successful that I was only working a few days a week and easing back into full-time office job. And now I'm antsy and just want to get it over with and start. So perfect timing. But my thorn is definitely that. I'll have to be working full time again. It's a double-edged sword. I loved having a couple days off every week to catch up on work at home and do stuff. I've been traveling a lot, so it's nice to have time at home to reset everything.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I'm not traveling as much in the next month, so maybe
we'll see how it goes.
It'll be better. But yeah, what about you, Ev? What's your rose and thorn?
I would say my rose is the beautiful detour, long drive. We were driving to the studio this morning and Kate was like, do you want to go the short way or the long way? And we were like, the long way. And we went all the way up to the tippy top of this mountain lookout. And it's so beautiful. And I love that the fall colors are here right now in Denver because they're definitely not in LA.
You know, actually, that's my real rose is that my motion sickness has not been as bad.
Oh, yeah.
Let us do that because all before the last time we visited and stuff. I'm like, no, please, God, get me out of this car ASAP. And finally, I have 5 different things I have to do before I get in the car. But then I don't get sick. So I'll take it.
Yes. I'm feeling good today. I don't think I have a thorn. So
gosh, I love that.
All right.
I love that.
Let's get into it. Veronica.
All right. So this Supreme Court case is Chiles v. Salazar, which is about basically conversion therapy bans in the state of Colorado, with obviously implications for the rest of the country, conversion therapy bans as well, because the basis of the case is that this therapist, Kaylee Chiles, is suing the state of Colorado over their conversion therapy bans, claiming that it violates free speech and her ability to provide adequate care to people who come to her asking for care. And so basically that the conversion therapy bans specifically in the state of Colorado are unconstitutional, but dozens, most states have conversion therapy bans, so that this could be have a devastating impact on the progress that we have made combating harmful practices towards queer. So I'm going to start with a brief timeline and the facts of the case. We're going to talk about the language of the contested legislation that is being sued over, and then give a little bit of analysis and a little bit about the briefs that have been submitted, because I think that's a really interesting part of this case is the amount of mobilization there's been of people submitting briefs to the Supreme Court. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that too. I didn't know anything about Amicus briefs before this case.
We have become a little bit of it was a crash course in Amicus briefs.
Yeah, so we'll get into all of those things. So, but stop me, Evelyn, because if you feel anything needs more explanation at any point. Because I've been thinking only about this all week, and I don't know how much
it's been a deep dive.
It is an untangled thread or just a ball of knots I'm going to throw at you. But anyway, this case was taken by the Supreme Court of the United States in March 2025. That was when they accepted the case and said that they would hear it. Amicus briefs have been submitted over the summer, and then oral arguments are going to be heard by the Supreme Court on October 7th, 2025, which is a few days from now, probably already happened by the time you're listening to this. I'd be really interested in maybe
following up and talking about what goes on in the oral argument. Yeah, for sure.
And then the decision is expected next summer, mid 2026. So the process is so long for these court cases. I don't quite understand, but it is the way that it is.
I feel like I had some familiarity with this around the Dobbs decision.
Well, yes. I mean, I understand that that's the timeline, but I still don't really understand I don't get why it takes that long. I know it's all part of the process. Like they have to come to the decision. They analyze all the information.
Yeah.
Come to a decision.
Well, they're also just like weighing a lot
other
of cases
all the time.
Yeah.
And then they have to create their decisions and then whatever. But I took a constitutional law class in high school and I did mock youth and government, mock government too. So I felt like I was like back in high school trying to figure out what the heck a court case even looked like. So. Yes. But anyway, so here's like the actual language of the legislation that's being contested, right? So, you know, the state of Colorado is being sued over this legislation. It bans conversion therapy. I wanted to see like, what do they mean when they say ban and what do they mean when they say conversion therapy? Mm-hmm. Typically legislation, like a bill will always start with definitions of terms. And that was what was like, seemed most relevant to me because it's pretty straightforward, banning conversion therapy. I just want to know what they mean. Yeah. So I'm going to go ahead and just read it and then we'll break it down a little bit.
Beautiful.
Okay, so conversion therapy means any practice or treatment by a licensed physician specializing in the practice of psychiatry that attempts or purports to change an individual's sexual orientation or gender identity, including efforts to change behaviors or gender expressions, or to eliminate or reduce sexual or romantic attraction or feelings towards individuals of the same sex. Conversion therapy does not include practices or treatments that provide 1. Acceptance, support, and understanding for the facilitation of an individual's coping, social support, and identity exploration and development, including sexual orientation neutral interventions to prevent or address unlawful contact or unsafe sexual practices, as long as the counseling does not seek to change sexual orientation or gender identity. Or 2, assistance to a person undergoing gender transition. That's the main definition of conversion therapy. So the first part is saying what conversion therapy is, and the second part is what it isn't, with 2 parts to that. So, you know, it starts by saying that conversion therapy means any licensed mental health care professional working in their like status or capacity as a licensed psychiatrist, mental health care professional that's attempting or purporting, so like claiming to change an individual's sexuality or gender identity. Yes. So it refers both to gay people and trans people, including efforts that change behaviors or gender expressions or to eliminate or reduce sexual attraction or gender dysphoria. Right. So what it's talking about there is like banning like this purporting to change something. Like I'm claiming that if you come to me for therapy, I have clinical methods that will get rid of your homosexuality, get rid of your gender dysphoria. You will be a cis, straight, and happy individual who no longer has unwanted same-sex attractions.
I think, that's the key piece to really dig into about the language of the existing Colorado legislation is that it's not saying that religious therapists can't exist. It's not saying that clients cannot come to a religious therapist and want to abide by their religion's teachings on gender and sexuality. Like the individuals can come to a religious therapist and want to talk about it within a lens of wanting to adhere to that teaching. Right. And this is also something that's just like implicit to the ethics of therapy is that therapists are not supposed to really tell you what to do. They're supposed to facilitate you working through certain things. Right. They're not. So if your aim, if what you're coming into therapy for is to reduce distress, for example, that you're experiencing around, like you could say, I'm gay or I experience same-sex attraction and I'm a Christian and I don't want to act on it, but I'm experiencing a lot of distress around that. That's something you can go unpack in therapy. Mm-hmm. The therapist just can't say, and I will also be able to make you straight, maybe.
Right. Like you can unpack in whatever setting the client, like I think a lot of ethical therapy is client driven based on the client's goals. Some people go into therapy, like, for example, we were in therapy when we were leaving the church and our therapist did not ever push us to leave the church. In fact, often I would come raging against how much like Catholics were driving me crazy and how much I hated Catholicism. And she would gently like tell me about her coworkers who were Catholic and very authentic people who were kind and empathetic. And some of them were affirming towards
We went to
people.
the same therapist.
Right.
For context, because it's Steubenville, Ohio, and there's not a lot of people there.
But like she did not
she was not
pushing
us out of the church. She was until we wanted that individually, separately.
And I feel like, sometimes I wish that sometimes I wanted her to just tell me what to do or tell me like leave the church, Veronica, that's best for you. But
that's just not what good therapy is, because you need to be able to step into your own autonomy.
Right. So I want to talk about part 2, which is the things that it doesn't include. So conversion therapy in this, and also when it says conversion therapy means or does not include, that's specifically in the language of this legislation.
Yes.
It's defining the terms for the legislation.
Yes.
We're not even going to argue about what is or what isn't conversion therapy beyond how they're defining it in the legislation, because that's only what's relevant in terms of what's prohibited or not prohibited in Colorado law at this time.
Yes.
But it doesn't include, which means you're permitted to do this all you want, acceptance, support, and understanding for an individual who's experiencing either same-sex attraction or gender dysphoria. And I think the important thing is, I think if you're reading this as a normal lay person, acceptance and support is often assumed to be affirmation, like the same as affirming and saying, well, I love you, and which is why I can't accept you. I can't accept your gay identity or support your gay identity in any way. But in a clinical setting, you were saying that you have some experience of what the unconditional positive regard, those words in a clinical setting, what that means.
So I was kind of, when we were talking through this a little bit before we started recording, I was thinking about this in the setting of having worked in crisis for a little over 2 years, where I was working with clients facing mental health and substance abuse crisis. And a key part of working in any kind, I was not, just to make it abundantly clear, I was not licensed. I was acting in a tech type of role. But if you're anywhere around the field of working with people going through mental health crises, one of the major things is an unconditional positive regard, which doesn't mean that I'm yes, do coke. It's not yes, queen, go snort some coke in the bathroom. That's not an unconditional positive regard. An unconditional positive regard is viewing your patient as a person who is rooted in goodness. And I think that that's something it honestly feels very core to just the way the Catholic Church talks about the dignity of the human person. You're not saying you agree with everything that a person does. That's not an unconditional positive regard. An unconditional positive regard is where you don't just think someone's evil. You don't think that they're doing something bad just because they're bad. You see them as a good person, and you're trying to help them develop the coping skills to live a life where you're not having detrimental behaviors.
Which, to be honest, that feels like exactly what the church does. Or says the way you should treat gay people, like you said, to see them as a human person. So this is saying that conversion therapy doesn't include that. The important thing is to always treat your client with acceptance and support, this unconditional positive regard that you're a good person. I'm trying to help you do what is most aligned for you.
Yes.
Which doesn't mean, oh, we're going to accept your same-sex attractions and I'm going to push you to find a boyfriend or find a girlfriend, or push you towards gender transition.
Because that would be bad therapy also. If you were a therapist who had a client who was, say you're a secular therapist who had a client who is religious and experiences same-sex attraction, and they're saying, I want to adhere to church teaching. It would be bad therapy to try to push them to abandon their religious beliefs, in the exact same way. That's just not the way that therapeutic practice works.
No, it's not the way that it works, and it's not the way that it should work. In good therapy.
Ethically.
And that's something that I want to get into in a little bit too, about it's very normal to regulate anything that is being licensed, especially by the state, of standards for things.
Yes.
Even stuff like electricity or utilities and HVAC and stuff have all these regulations that you have to meet. Healthcare, there's all sorts of red tape of things you can or can't do in a clinical setting and things you could get in big trouble over. And it's only banning this particular conversion therapy, which only only means attempting or purporting to change an individual's sexual orientation or gender identity, including to change behaviors or gender expressions. That also means, attempting or purporting to change an individual's sexual orientation or gender identity can also refer to making the kids gay,
right,
or making the kids trans, or,
yes.
Maybe you're a teenager experiencing a lot of depression and, the classic puberty teenager feeling uncomfortable about your body and like being insecure about yourself. The therapist isn't allowed to be like, well, I am a liberal
therapist, and have you considered that you feel uncomfortable because you're trans? Like,
exactly.
It covers it in both directions.
Exactly. If the kid comes to them and says, hey, I feel really uncomfortable in my body, I kind of think it might be in this like gender way, then they'll say, okay, well, we can explore that.
Like, we can talk about it. Let's unpack that. Let's see why you feel that way.
Right. And then I think the thing about the acceptance, support, and understanding, which is specifically to facilitate an individual's coping, social support, and identity exploration and development, can also refer to doing that in a way that's aligned with your religious values as well.
Yes.
Like if you believe, I really don't think that this law is just to protect minors, but it doesn't prohibit anything that the way that the church says you should treat queer people.
Right.
You can also help them to facilitate their coping and social support. That could look like learning coping skills for handling gender dysphoria while still living as your
exactly. Or if you're living as a single celibate individual in the church who experiences same-sex attraction, what are some positive community factors that we can build into your life to kind of support you in that?
Mm-hmm. How can we do help manage the levels of distress, anxiety, depression that you might be under as a result of unwanted same-sex attraction or stuff like that? How can we help you live your best life? The issue comes with specifically trying to change a gender identity or sexual orientation, specifically claiming that you have a secret or a special cure-all that can specially change that.
Well, and I think the thing is too, a lot of the narrative within religious individuals around the way that we change same-sex attraction, for example, is unpacking childhood trauma. Right. If you think that, that's not evidence-based, but if you think that, this doesn't prevent you from unpacking your client's childhood trauma. So if you think that will solve that problem for them, that's therapy. You can unpack their childhood trauma. You just can't be doing it saying, and this will make you not be gay.
Right. And the reason why you can't do that is because there is evidence, research evidence that is
to the contrary.
Exactly. That doesn't work and in fact causes more harm towards the client, which I'll get into in a minute. That's why it's banned, not because there's a liberal agenda and a gay agenda to make all the kids gay and trans, to destroy the family.
It's just that the overwhelming body of research that we have access to at this point does not support conversion therapy as effective.
Right.
So you just can't promise that you can do something. To me, the way it reads is if you were going into a doctor for some other medical condition and the doctor is telling you, oh, well, you could do this thing, but they're telling you something that they just think that there's no research or evidence behind to support. They're being oh, you could cure your heart disease by eating a lot of oranges. Yeah. But I don't know.
Right. Yeah. They can give you advice or say, well, but
they need to follow evidence-based practice. That's just how medicine works.
Exactly. And nowhere else in therapy or regular physical medicine can claim results with 100% accuracy anyway, because everyone's different.
That's true.
Anyway, so I don't go to therapy and have my therapist say, well, there's a 99% chance that you will never have anxiety again after our 6-week
100%
intensive therapy. That's not the case. It's aimed at reducing symptoms. It's specifically in the terms of reducing distress and the negative impact it might have on my life, which again, you can still do that. You can lessen the negative impact that your same-sex attraction or gender dysphoria might have on your life while living in accordance with your values as a Christian or a Catholic or other religious person who believes, that you want to be straight or live a celibate lifestyle or as the sex you were born as.
Yeah.
In order to sue the state of Colorado, so the way that, like, I guess in the court wise, the way it works and what she has to prove in order to win her case is that, first of all, that the law is unconstitutional and that it has caused irreversible harm to her personally in some way. So because this is one person suing the state of Colorado, it's not, an organization. Right. Specifically, she might have, backing and support from organizations at this point, once she's gotten here. But specifically, she is claiming in court, she has to prove this irreversible harm. So the argued harm that she's saying in this case is the loss of business because she turned away LGBT teen clients out of fear of breaking the law. So out of an abundance of caution, when looking at the law, she turned away all her queer clients saying, well, I'm really worried that as a Christian therapist, something that I would say would be misinterpreted as the law, as breaking the law, and I don't want to get sued or go to jail or get shut down. Right. And so I turned away all this clientele, which has caused irreversible harm because now I have no clients and I have no income because this is unnecessarily and unconstitutionally restricting my
speech, right? That's the claim that she's making.
Yeah, and that it violates this free speech. So the interesting thing, though, from what I've seen, is that the state of Colorado told her, like, that the stuff that she does is not even conversion therapy.
Right.
She was doing exactly what the law permits, that we said, of, like, helping her queer clients live in accordance with their Christian values, not engaging in harmful, disproven practices that claim to change or completely remove attractions.
Exactly.
It's just about coping and living with the attractions that you are experiencing. And maybe we can lessen the amount that, like, it consumes my entire life if I, like, don't have to think about it all day every day because it's ruling my life anymore. Like, that's possible. But so anyway, like, the state told her she didn't that she was fine. She could take her queer clients and do the type of therapy she was doing, but she was still afraid and unafraid because of the legislation and turned away this client base because she did not want to misspeak and have her license revoked.
I'm glad she's concerned about licensing.
Right. That's like so important.
That's great. That's important. I think that's why just like diving into what this law actually says, what the language of the law actually says, and like just making it abundantly clear that what she's doing is not in violation of it is the important piece, because obviously like it's not like we agree with everything with her, but I understand on a level like the processing that she's trying to do, right? Because I think that's something we've seen a lot in the wake of the Dobbs case, where individual states have created this abortion legislation that's caused a lot of medical institutions and like medical professionals to have a lot of fear around performing abortion adjacent-ish
things that aren't all
standard medical procedures.
Yeah, no, that's actually a really good correlation that I hadn't thought of, that it's very similar. We were just talking about this last night. That we did pro-life canvassing together a few years ago. You did a lot more than me, but my experience doing it, like, I had really powerful conversations with conservatives who were against abortion, but were also strongly against anti-abortion legislation, specifically out of this very thing of like, the law is not always clear. It often causes problems for people who then have to interpret the law. The lawmakers are not experts on everything. Right. They define terms, especially when it comes to medical care. That's not their forte. They know the law, not medicine. And so you do have doctors and healthcare systems now who somebody maybe has a miscarriage and they need a DNC to
remove like the placenta or
which is like very standard routine care depending on how far along you are in a miscarriage.
But DNCs are also used as abortion practices in a different type of scenario. So yeah, it's like kind of, I want to be like empathetic to the fact that like sometimes legislation can cause confusion and distress for people who are working within their practices. That's why I just think it needs to be very clear that
I think especially the language here that we just read at the beginning, it kind of comes off one-sided at the beginning. It says conversion therapy means changing someone's gender or sexuality to but it doesn't include accepting and doing gender affirming care and supporting someone through transition or their gay lifestyle, without being able to see how like that can also include living according to the Christian values of celibacy and etc.
Yes.
And that it is like difficult to parse out the law sometimes.
Well, and that's why, I guess I just think that's why it needs to, people just need to have an awareness of the inefficacy of conversion therapy practices, because that's the entire piece of what's going on here is just like, there's a lot of times this has happened in history with a lot of different things where like we used to give women lobotomies. And then we were like, actually, this, not that like women's whatever like was going on, like the hysteria that they were calling it, like not that whatever like mental health distress that those women were going through wasn't a real thing that they were facing, but that, cutting out a part of their brain was turning out to cause a lot more harm than good.
Right.
Like that's what's going on with conversion therapy. It's just not the solution to the problem. Right. If you believe that same-sex attraction or gender dysphoria, if you believe you're in your religious practice that this is a problem, you're allowed to have that belief. You just can't do something that we already know at this point not only is ineffective, but actually increases risk of worse mental health outcomes.
One of the really frustrating things about this is that I think you have to have an understanding of conversion therapy and what it means. Conversion therapy has been kind of taboo and outlawed for a while now. And so I think there can be some confusion about what is conversion therapy or isn't conversion therapy, because there's never been like one set of clinical practice that is so for example, like if you go to therapy for like whatever, you might have CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, which refers to a specific model created by specific people who regulate, like provide materials of this is how you provide cognitive behavioral therapy. We've studied it and it like reduces distress by this percentage and this sort of like demographic, right? The same thing with like ACT, acceptance, and is it compassion therapy? Acceptance. I don't remember.
I couldn't particularly.
Oh, acceptance and commitment therapy. Yes.
Thank you.
And then EMDR and stuff, like it refers to specific practices, whereas conversion therapy refers to like, it can refer to so much.
Which is why they define specifically what they're talking about within this legislation. But I do think there is confusion because like, I don't know, I remember reading like Boy Erased as like, I think when I was like in high school, and like that's like a very like violent form of conversion therapy
camp, right? Where they would go to change, to make you straight again. And they would like,
the practices were very like not only emotionally and psychologically abusive, but also like physically abusive.
Right.
Whereas so some people think about it like when they're thinking about it, they think about that. And some people like are not aware of.
They're like, well, I'm not going to a sleepaway camp.
Right.
Right.
Okay. The main point is like there are a lot of definitions, or there are a lot of ways that people conceptualize it. So simply it's just what's dealt with here is the way that it's defined in the legislation.
And the legislation doesn't even provide like more of a definition of like, it refers to using electroshock therapy to change your thing. It refers to talk therapy to change, or trauma therapy to change orientation. It doesn't even go into all of those things. So you do have to have some level of assessment on your own of like, is this practice, me as a licensed physician specializing in the practice of psychiatry, attempting or purporting to change sex or gender, sexuality or gender identity, or change the behaviors or gender expressions? A big part of conversion therapy is not only like learning how to live a celibate lifestyle, but was also like beating out gay behaviors, trying to make men more masculine, and like punishing like effeminacy in gay men or masculinity in gay women was also a big part of it. So I think that's important as well. We're not trying to change someone's personality to match what we think a woman should be or what a man should be.
Yes.
You can still make decisions of how you want to live your life. And if if you are interested in doing that, you can, but it's not, it's
you can be a person who's like, I'm going to be more masculine now.
And
like a therapist just can't compel that.
This is also specifically with minors as well.
Yes, that's the whole other piece.
Referring to minors, which often this is like not consensual. This is a parent sending their child to this because the parent is not accepting, supporting, and understanding their child unconditionally. And so they're sending them to this therapist.
And that's why it's particularly important of a ban. I don't even, does Colorado have any kind of legislation around this around adults?
I mean, not that I'm
aware of. Like what's being
with
contested is with minors. Right. And I think that's like the other piece of it is that like, I mean, generally conversion therapy is not an evidence-based practice, but particularly it should not be involuntarily imposed.
Especially because of the harmfulness that it does. Because, you know, lots of parents bring their kids to therapy to help with like mental health conditions and issues and stuff like that, which is great. And sometimes the kid maybe doesn't want to go to therapy, right? Yes. And the therapist, but they don't sit there and like force the kid to talk. They try to do their best to help the kid, but therapy is like very much based on the client-patient or the client-provider relationship, which you took a bunch of like counseling and psychology and social work classes at Franciscan.
Where it was very interesting to kind of talk through these things for anyone who like may not be familiar. Like Franciscan is a very religious university, and this is where I was taking these kinds of classes. And I think a lot of people kind of struggled to wrap their head around the difference between your own personal faith convictions and your role as a healthcare provider. Right. They're just different.
I read this article on the Trevor Project that they published on August 25th of this year, titled What You Need to Know About the U.S. Supreme Court Case on Conversion Therapy. And it sort of summarizes the legislation saying that conversion therapy is any set of practices or methods aimed at changing the sexuality, attraction, gender identity, or gender expression of a queer person. These methods of therapy, quote therapy, have been disproven as not only ineffective, but also deeply harmful. And then lists so many sources of studies that it is deeply harmful. For teens, especially because of the whole thing about like acceptance, support, and understanding is so important for teens to have that. We were talking in a different episode about the difference like that one supportive, positive adult mentor can be in a teenager's life in reducing general like depression and like raising the quality of life or the meaning of life by having that support. And that can still be like, you know, hey, I don't think that you should date someone of the same gender as you. I don't think that as a boy you should wear dresses or makeup or whatever. But, you know, I love and support you anyway, and I'm not going to make you feel like you're bad for having those feelings. We're just going to deal with them.
I think an important piece to maybe talk about with this too, we were, I think similarly in an episode that we were working on yesterday, we talked about this a little bit, but is that I understand why conversion therapy almost seems like the compassionate or like the logical conclusion of church teaching, right? Like it's, I understand how your brain gets there if you see that, like, it's way more painful, I think, to accept that church teaching, if you're a person experiencing same-sex attraction, living within a religious environment, or like holding religious beliefs, I think it's way more painful to accept that this means a life of singleness or celibacy than to believe that there's a way this can be fixed, right? Like, I understand how your brain gets there. And I understand that people, like, I don't think a lot of people are ill-intentioned. They want to help people. But at the end of the day, just because it's kind of a logical conclusion we can bring ourselves to, just, I'm not saying it's I don't know how much I want to say logical, but like I understand the thought process that brings you there, because I feel like I also kind of believed that for a period of time. Like I was saying, in high school, I had read the Boy Erased book and I was like, yeah, that's crazy. That's horrible. But I did hold a narrative for a long time that like trauma plays a role in like making people queer, and that this is a thing that's fixable, because I do feel in some way that it's I don't know, compassionate is like the word that keeps coming to mind. Like, obviously you don't want people to have to bear this cross for their whole life.
Right.
But we have the body of research on it now. Like, we have the evidence now. We just have to be accepting of reality.
Right. Which is that we simply are not able to change someone's sexuality or gender identity. And that goes both ways. Like, we can't
make straight people gay.
Exactly. Like,
or trans.
That isn't how things work.
Right.
There is some like cultural influence, and there's some ways where like you might try to fit in by being a certain way, or it might have peer pressure from your friends to act a certain way, or want to fit in and act a certain way, whether that is like one side or the other, depending on what environment you're in. But we joke, we were talking also yesterday about how like no end of TikToks of straight women like crying that they're not lesbians. I would so much rather date a woman. Like,
oh yeah,
I'm so sick of men. Like, this is crazy. Like, this is clearly proof that you're born a certain way, because like
I've had
if I
multiple
could date a
moms
woman,
that I've nannied for who have said that to me. Like, I don't know if you're like new to our channel over here. Hi, I'm dating a woman, but I've had multiple moms that I've nannied for say that to be like, oh, I know sexuality is not a choice because I would not be married to a man.
Yeah.
Just like that queen.
And people who've like tried to date women and are like, I really can't do it. Yeah. Even I'm so sick of, men XYZ. Here's like one last thing that the Trevor Project like unpacked on this. So despite the name conversion therapy, these practices are in no way legitimate therapy and lack any standards or basis in evidence. These unscientific practices are rooted in outdated ideas that LGBTQ plus people are, quote, unnatural or need to be, quote, cured. Historically, these practices have involved behavior modification, like trying to get rid of the gay personality behaviors, right? Or effeminate, behaviors for trans people acting against their appropriate gender or whatever. So changing those behaviors and painful aversive treatments, like the type of treatments where they would have men masturbate thinking about other men and then like shock them, right? To do the electroshock therapy, or okay, Pavlov, but that doesn't work out. Like it's just not Pavlov dog people is like ends up being harmful and is painful and aversive and causes like other forms of trauma, especially in a sexual setting.
Right.
You're never gonna have good sexual like functioning if you're like having trauma flashbacks to your electric shock, or like the gross scents that they pumped into the room to make you throw up whenever they showed you a picture of a hot guy. Crazy stuff that they did. Historically, these practices have involved behavior modification and painful aversive treatments, as well as discredited psychoanalytic theories such as the claim that being gay is caused by faulty parenting, trauma, or abuse. That's such a prevalent narrative in conservative worlds, religious and otherwise, that you're gay because of trauma, because of your family and your parenting, or abuse that you had growing up, which is just not evidence-based.
Yeah, and I think it's like hurtful to a lot of like very lovely Christian parents and families who like have a queer child. And
what does that say about
that? Places the blame, like that does place the blame back onto those parents and makes them think something they did is what caused it.
Especially if you see being gay as bad,
right,
in some way, or at the very least, like even if you don't look at your kid differently for being gay, if you believe that you shouldn't be in a gay relationship, you can see that can be very difficult for your child. Right. And even if you are very affirming, you can still see how being gay or trans is very difficult in today's world.
I experienced that a lot, like in the church and with like a lot of relationships I had in the church as I was leaving and starting to date my partner now. Like there's a lot of people who, still had very strong feelings about what I should or shouldn't do with my life, but could still come into conversations with me and be like, I know that I will never understand how hard this is for you.
Exactly. And as a parent, I'm sure like seeing your kid dealing with that is difficult. And then having this narrative be, well, it's your fault because you must have parented them wrong or allowed your kid to be abused or be traumatized in some way. Like you failed your child in some way that you could have avoided this, which is so hard for parents. I see how that's hard for parents. And then you want to help your kid and fix it so they don't have to deal with that. And especially as a parent, and if you think you did something wrong to fix those problems, you are responsible for your child. So it's hard because I know people are just trying to do the right thing by their kids a lot of time in the midst of a lot of fear
100%.
and pain and like uncertainty about what this might mean for their child. But the other thing here about all of this is that this law only affects like a narrow like subset of adults who have influence in a child's life, who act in a specific way. You know, it doesn't affect if the licensed, you know, if Kaylee Chiles, the therapist, for instance, has her own gay child, she can say whatever she wants to her child at home, you know, when she's not working at a clinical setting. If she has other children in her life, friends or relatives, children,
and she's not working in a therapeutic capacity,
she can still say whatever to them, mentor them. Especially non-licensed religious counselors are very common and not regulated at all in this setting. As a mental health care professional, you don't have to, it doesn't apply to them. So any priests or youth ministers or spiritual counselors.
Yeah, actually, for example, like priests or religious leaders of any kind, if they have a tax exempt church, are not allowed to stand up at the pulpit and specifically say you must vote for this one candidate, but they still are allowed to have those political opinions and discuss them in other settings. You just can't preach it from the pulpit. I feel like it's a very similar thing. It's not compelled speech. It's just in a particular way.
I think, thank you for saying compelled speech, because I wanted to say this too, that the legislation isn't requiring you to affirm a sexuality or gender identity. It's not requiring you to call anyone gay. It's not requiring you to use someone preferred names and pronouns. It's not forbidding you from using the language of same-sex attraction and gender dysphoria even in a licensed therapeutic setting. Like if it goes against your values to call someone gay because their identity isn't as gay as a beloved child of God, like you can use that language in therapy. It's not compelling much of anything other than like forbidding specifically conversion therapy practices. So you cannot pressure children towards a specific outcome, like promising a gay person after counseling will no longer be gay, right? Like you're allowed to help youth explore their identity one way or the other. In fact, you're encouraged to do that. And there's clauses allowing the therapist to help them explore their sexuality and gender ethically. And so I think that's really important. Yeah. Okay. I want to move on and talk about the Amicus briefs because I think that's like one of the most interesting things right now, especially from a religious standpoint, instead of just like politically, like conversion therapy in the world. Like, okay, so this specifically when it comes to like what is like our connection to this and the Catholic world, like how involved is this, right? So the way that this works, I guess, with like a court case is that you can submit what's called an amicus brief. Amicus is the Latin word for friend. So it just means like I have some sort of interest in this case because it might have some impact on me. And this is like what I think about it. And like you present it's a very legal document and you submit it officially. So all of these are public. The SCOTUS website has like each court case listed out and then like a timeline of developments and actions that have taken officially for each case. So for example, adding the case to the docket, having an oral argument, scheduling an oral argument is like on the calendar. Okay, so like on August 2nd, we scheduled it for October 7th. And then on August 13th, this amicus brief was filed. And then you can click the link to go to the PDFs for all of these amicus briefs. There are so many for this. I would have been interested to dig deeper to see like how common this is for Supreme Court cases. I would say like probably these big ones that get a lot of news coverage would probably get more amicus briefs, but there's two different sides of this. Okay, so we have the people who are pro Chiles side, so pro conversion therapy, and then pro Salazar. By the way, I think Salazar is the AG, right, in Colorado, the attorney general, or someone in legal. It's just the name of whoever in the state of Colorado is like answering to the fact that the law exists. It's really like Chiles versus Colorado, or like therapist versus the state of Colorado legislation, right? So So the Salazar side, and I always mix up like defendant and plaintiff. I think like the plaintiff is the one
I think
complaining that you got angry, whatever.
We don't know.
It does, yeah, which is why I'm just saying like pro-Chiles on the Chiles side, which means pro-conversion therapy, or like anti-conversion therapy. Right. Briefs being submitted on both sides. And I just love like reading the names of them. So there's so many conservative Catholic public figures and organizations submitting.
Didn't the USCCB submit a brief?
And the USCCB is
that one really got me. Like,
yeah.
Like, are you therapists?
Therapy, right. The USCCB pro-conversion therapy. And so an Amicus brief, let me just give you like, I have one that I want to go into and I'm just going to use it to like give. So this one specifically is 28 pages. The brief is of parents of conversion therapy participants and clergy supporting families affected by conversion therapy. As Amici Curiae supporting respondents, which would be the Salazar side, the anti-conversion therapy side. So then it has a whole table of contents, and then it shows like a little bit of the interests of the Amici Curiae. So these are the people who are writing the brief, and this is why they're interested in this case. Here's a brief rundown of each of the persons who contributed to this, and then you have a summary of their argument, and then a deeper argument that goes into the legal backing.
Yeah.
So much of our court system is like, so there's this legislation, and then this is the way the courts interpreted the law. Right. I see everything through the Catholic world. So you have scripture and tradition, right?
Right.
Like you have the Bible and like the magisterium of the church has interpretation. Right. So the court system is like
the church interpreting the scripture.
Right. It's like the catechism and the encyclicals and all this stuff, right?
Yes.
So what like court cases do and what briefs do when you're making an argument, or as a lawyer, what you're arguing, you know, when you are arguing before any court is saying, well, this is the legislation, this is what it says, and this is like the specific facts of this case, and then this is how traditionally in the past we've interpreted the law to apply to a scenario. And often something gets before the court in a situation like this because you have to analyze a lot to figure out exactly, like it doesn't completely line up with precedent because there might be other details influencing it, which is why it like goes up into this higher level instead of just being settled at the lowest level. So anyway, so like all these different people have to like start off by saying why they're affected. So like Mary Rice Hassan, who I saw speak earlier this year at Franciscan's commencement ceremony, her group, the Ethics and Public Policy Center, I think, or something. I'm not like a huge expert on her. That just like caught my eye because I had literally just seen her speak. And she talked about like gender dysphoria. And I was like confused why she brought it up. I didn't realize like, oh, there's this court case going on right now. And that's very much on her radar and part of what she does. I just
thought she was bringing it into the conversation for no reason.
Anyways, it's all falling into place now, right?
Yeah.
But other conservative Catholic public figures like contributed to political think tank ones. Of course, the Heritage Foundation submitted one. The USCCB submitted one saying this like religious freedom and free speech wise, like, goes against, like infringes on our rights.
I kind of get it, but I really don't, because like the only people who are actually impacted by this are therapists, religious therapists, and participants in their
licensed mental health care professionals who happen to also be religious.
Right.
Like it doesn't impact non-licensed religious.
Yeah. I don't really know what it has to do with bishops at all.
Exactly. I don't. Okay. Okay. So it's seeing like so many names from my past and people that I recognize and people who hold a lot of power in the conservative world. There were other ones too. Like I just did all the research for Dr. James Dobson when he passed away, and we did an episode on Focus on the Family, Alliance Defending Freedom, and I was like, all of his organizations that he was involved with submitted like individual briefs and stuff. And I was like, wow. So, but then what really warmed my heart and gave me a lot of hope was seeing lots of Christians who were supportive of queer youth and speaking up about the dangers of conversion therapy and the fact that it's clinically makes sense to ban a therapy which is proven to be harmful and ineffective and also harmful, So different coalitions or groups of Christians / religious therapists wrote ones. Exodus Project, the former Exodus Project leaders who led like the big original conversion therapy movement that popularized it through like summer conferences.
It was the largest
youth.
conversion therapy group at the time.
And they were specifically like ex-gay. Like they
Yes.
identified as like, I used to be gay and live a gay lifestyle, and now I'm married to my wife who's beautiful and I love her and I'm attracted to her, and I no longer experience these attractions to other men. And then years later it all fell apart.
Yes.
Because of the advocacy of parents whose children tragically took their own life due to increased distress when like
From
the therapy
conversion
wasn't working. Like when conversion therapy makes you hate yourself and it doesn't work, and everyone is saying, oh, like,
well, and I think that's a big part of the
effective.
psychological harm is claiming that it can fix it, and then when it doesn't, you're just like, okay, well, like
it must be me.
There's just something deeply wrong with me.
Right. And then you blame yourself. Like you already think there's something wrong with you because you're gay, and now you can't stop being gay.
Yeah.
And there's no hope for me because the way I was going to be holy was by not being gay anymore.
Right.
Instead of learning how to integrate that in an authentic way in your life. And then the one that I like am going to read you a little bit of as a specific one is, like I said, the parents. So these are parents of minors who engaged in conversion therapy, as well as religious clergy who have supported these families through what happens when, as a minor, you engage in conversion therapy. So obviously, like their interests, they are parents of children who participated in and suffered from conversion therapy, and one religious leader who helps families like theirs. They respectfully submit this brief to the court in the hopes that the court will reflect on their stories, told authentically and in the first person, when considering the constitutionality of Colorado's minor conversion therapy law, MCTL. That's the law that's being, MCTL, which sounds like a form of like
a file.
Oh, yes, like HTML. I was thinking like the lipids and fat, like HDL, LDL.
MCT, isn't that one of them?
Yeah, exactly. Coconut oil, MCT is crossed with like cholesterol. Exactly. That's why. So each story illustrates the harms that conversion therapy can inflict on children and their families. They believe that the harm they have suffered and witnessed, while deeply personal, is not unique, and that legislation can and should consider their stories and the harm that conversion therapy causes when deciding whether conversion therapy falls below the acceptable level of medical care for licensed professionals. So there are several children who lost, I said that again. Parents who lost their children after going to conversion therapy, including Joyce Calvo, the mother of Alana Chen, who of course is
from Dear Alana.
In the Dear Alana podcast, which we talk about all the time, and you should listen to it if you haven't. But
particularly in the context of
exactly
this case
in this,
going
right?
on.
Like a very relevant story. So Alana Chen, a devout young woman who died by suicide in 2019 after pursuing conversion therapy in the Archdiocese of Denver, Colorado. Joyce is a mother of 4 living in Colorado and continues to speak out publicly, urging parents and faith communities to affirm and protect youth. She recently shared her testimony with the Association of U.S. Catholic Priests. There's also the mother of Gerard Conley from Boy Raced, and then a few others. And then the pastor referenced is Robert Cottrell, who was an evangelical pastor for more than 20 years. And him and his wife, Susan, now provide support to individuals who have experienced religiously based rejection because of their sexual orientation or gender identity, and also providing support to parents. They've counseled thousands of parents and adult children, including many affected by conversion therapy. So those are the people involved. And here's just like the summary of their argument. In enacting the MCTL, Colorado's legislature recognized what the overwhelming weight of scientific and medical evidence shows. Conversion therapy is dangerous and ineffective for children. It harms their well-being and sense of self, their connection with their parents, and their relationship with faith, which is kind of what we were saying, that it harms like for yourself, just your sense of self and your well-being, but also your connection with your parents because your parents think they've messed you up in some way. And there's so much guilt involved. And the kid is getting this messaging that your parents must be distant to you in some way.
I think it's double-sided because I think you're also getting the message that you're this way because of your parents, right?
And that causes more distrust, especially then.
I actually liked what they said about the faith community piece of it as well. Like it exactly. It does cause, I think, for a lot of people, like a borderline irreparable rift between them and their faith.
One of the biggest reasons I think why people are leaving the church is being queer. Like being queer and feeling like there isn't a good place for you and just getting to like, I can't do this anymore and leaving the church, or from seeing the church's stance on it as a straight person or as a cis person on the outside.
Did you
of
know?
that.
Okay, I'm so sorry. This is like
okay.
a little bit of a tangential pop culture reference, but David Archuleta, he has his song "Held Together."
Oh,
where it's like, if they don't like the way you're made, then they're not any better. Then we'll go to hell together. Like I always thought. I always thought
mom.
Yeah, it's about his mom.
Oh my gosh, no,
I'd heard that song for so long, and I thought it was like in a relationship context.
Oh my god!
And when I found out the story behind it about his mom.
Oh my gosh,
being like, oh well, I can't be like I can't be in this place that is causing this much harm to you.
Yeah, she's like very religious and is like, well, if you're going to hell for being gay, we're going to hell together because these people are being really mean to you. And that's not a heaven that I want to be a part of.
Yeah.
It's really, I always see. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And yeah, it does cause this like rift with the faith. Yeah. Like whatever, we talk about this all the time, but the data on how faith often shows positive and increased mental health outcomes, right, for people, but unless you're queer, then it causes more harm to be growing up in the church. And you see that with conversion therapy as well. And I think there's just a big overlap between conversion therapy and religion and conservative, like,
and I don't think that statistic would necessarily like resonate in the way that it does. I don't think it's inherent to the thing. Like that's what I think is it causes a lot of friction for
homophobic.
Yeah, well, I'm saying it's not even, I don't even think it's necessarily inherent to like believing what you believe. It's the way in which it's been approached.
I think it would specifically, if you dug deeper, that it would be in like non-affirming churches or conservative churches that push like a conversion therapy narrative or don't have like the acceptance type of like people, because I mean, I think the official church stance is that it's not wrong to have same-sex attraction, it's wrong to act on them, but that's a nuance that so many people are still haven't gotten to that point. Like I think it's very different in a situation where you do have support and love and acceptance and feel like you can come out and be open about your same-sex attraction and not like, I don't know, like we've talked to a lot of our guy friends because I don't know, like I feel like sometimes women can get away with more, whereas like a very effeminate gay man, it's sometimes just like very obvious.
It's very obvious a lot of times when it's like I don't know. I think it is
they can't hide it in a lot of ways, and there's like the self-policing of your like behaviors if you're like. And that can just be very harmful. And I think if you have more ability to be open, with just, I'm gay, whatever, that does lead to different outcomes. So anyway, but conversion therapy, I think even just like it adds to the narrative of like, gay is bad and it is bad to be gay. So I have to make you not gay. Right. No, it's just bad to act gay. So like,
well, like per church teaching.
Exactly. Like officially, like the church, like is supposed to say that, like that is what the church says, and that's what the catechism says, and it says that every effort must be made to treat LGBT people with
they shouldn't face unjust discrimination.
Thank you.
To avoid unjust discrimination.
And also the catechism also says that the genesis of same-sex attraction is unknown. So we can't claim, oh, you're this way because you were abused or because your parents neglected you in some way.
It's just not consistent with the teaching.
Exactly. So whatever. Okay. Studies and meta-analyses, which synthesize data from multiple studies, have come to the same conclusion that conversion therapy is dangerous and ineffective and harms well-being and sense of self, etc. Indeed, a systematic review by the APA, American Psychological Association, of peer-reviewed literature on conversion therapy concluded that efforts to change sexual orientation both are unlikely to succeed and involve a risk of harm. So there's a report of the APA Task Force on Appropriate Therapeutic Responses to Sexual Orientation published in 2009. For example, this report identified research showing that teenagers who receive conversion therapy exhibit high rates of depression, suicidality, and anxiety. So this is like, conversion therapy is dangerous. Here's our argument that the MCTL does not violate the First Amendment. The law regulates mental health treatment, which is subject to, quote, less protection than other laws that regulate speech because it targets professional conduct practicing conversion therapy that only incidentally involves speech. They're quoting National Institute of Family and Life Advocates versus Becerra, which was 2018.
I just feel like there's so many instances I can think of where professional speech is regulated in a different capacity than personal speech.
Exactly.
Like, literally, the one that just came to mind, like if you're a realtor, you have there's certain things you have to disclose about. Like, it's just, that's not compelled speech. It's just professional standards.
Lying is not like outlawed. Like for me to tell you, yeah, I let the dog out this morning and you not doing that, right? Like, but if I even was like hired to walk your dog and we had a contract that I was going to walk your dog and tell you you walked your dog, like then you could sue me for like misrepresenting that I, walked and now your dog's been whatever. But like, in different settings, like you can have perjury or what are other words for lying and stuff.
Yes.
But lying itself is like not outlawed just for like two normal people in a normal setting to be chatting and lying.
And like, we're not saying it's good.
No, exactly.
But, like,
we're not saying that's good
just,
either.
There's just different
regulated
standards.
Law.
Yeah,
exactly. Which is like the same here with conversion therapy. It's like referring specifically to this therapeutic practice by therapeutic professionals. So it's not anti-constitutional at all to do that. They're allowed to regulate speech. Additionally, there's like good basis to regulate conversion therapy and outlaw it, considering that it is like there's demonstrated risk and harm. Right. Even I think like
it's not just vibes based.
Right, exactly. Especially for minors. Like if an adult like with informed consent wants to take that on, those risks for themselves and says, well, there's a low chance it would work and there's a high chance it might harm me, but I'm still going to take that risk. I'm thinking like that happens with cancer, like illnesses sometimes.
Where people will take like a experimental treatment.
Exactly. It's like
if this is experimental,
but you have to be like very upfront that like this is experimental, or hey, this has been approved, but it's like not super effective. So like you have to decide for yourself, like quality of life versus like
you wait. But a minor doesn't have the first of all, a minor doesn't have a capacity to make those decisions for themselves, and second of all, when you're in a situation like a minor does not have the like legal, not only like mental capacity, but legal capacity to make these decisions for themselves, meaning their parents could putting them in a stressful situation.
And the law is like trying to protect children from being in that like situation. There's nothing that's going to stop you from being able to seek that later on if you want that in life. So just the second point here, this is just summarizing their point. I'll just summarize this summary quickly. So while the academic literature details the dangers of conversion therapy at a conceptual level, this brief presents voices and experience of specific cases of children who experienced conversion therapy and left their lives forever altered, as well as the pastors, like as an outsider looking at these families and these children, like how that showed him firsthand the grief and trauma that conversion therapy leaves in its wake. These are all unique stories, but the commonalities emerge. And I am very like proud of these 4 parents who shared like very difficult stories of their children and the distress that they've witnessed in their children's lives, and very grateful for all the people who have been covering this Supreme Court case, working on briefs and submitting briefs and fighting for, the protection of kids. Because I would hate to like watch us go backwards to see.
Well, it's just I think that's where we need to like stand here and be like, I understand that what you're trying to do is protect kids.
Yeah.
Me too. Let's take 5 steps back from this and look and like try to look at it with a little more clarity, because I'm not saying that you're evil and you want to hurt kids.
Right.
I'm saying we need to look at this in a logical and evidence-based way.
Right.
This is harmful.
Like I know we're trying to help kids not be gay, because being gay in the church can be very distressing and ostracizing, and there's no path forward for you. But also like we just simply don't have an effective, safe way to do that for people. Like to make them stop being gay. And
it's one of those things that's just like such a hard conversation to have, and I think it's a very tense conversation to have. But I think the middle ground that we can have is that we care about kids. We don't want to restrict your ability to believe what you believe. This is simply about regulating licensed psychiatric care.
Can I end by reading? It's like a page and a half that Joyce, Alana Chen's mother, wrote as her first person like account of conversion therapy's effect on minors. I'm writing as the mother of a child who pursued conversion therapy and to share the devastating impact this had on our lives. I have 4 children, and my middle child, Alana, was the most sensitive and quiet one. She was a vibrant, popular kid who excelled in art, academics, and ultimate frisbee, but she was also different from her peers. From a young age, Alana dreamed of becoming a nun, volunteering regularly with the Sisters of Charity and the Sisters of Life in Denver, visiting the homeless under the Boulder Creek Bridge, and leading retreats organized by the Archdiocese of Denver. Alana was a frequent volunteer at the local Adoration Chapel. Her devotion led many in our lives to call her the saint, and as parents who were not particularly devout, we were weekly Mass Catholics, not the daily Mass ones. We were watchful but supportive of our daughter's spiritual interests. At 14, Alana confessed to her spiritual director that she was attracted to women. This priest told her not to tell us, her parent. And over the next 7 years of their mentoring relationship, Alana was directed to numerous, quote, Orthodox, Catholic resources, therapists, and archdiocesan-endorsed programs that promised to change or spiritually heal her same-sex attraction. As parents, we had no idea this was going on. Alana pursued these programs entirely on her own at the urging of spiritual guides she trusted, which I think also shows like
The vulnerability,
but also there's always supposed to be parental consent in medical care for
100%. And I think that's a big thing that's talked about, especially within the religious right, is this concept of parental consent
with abortion or
I was thinking around
care.
Yeah.
Like, you get a lot of
you
that.
can't get your ears pierced without parental consent. Like,
and
you can go through conversion therapy.
Mm-hmm. In Alana's journals, we discovered that the reason she sought to change her sexual orientation was so that she could follow her vocation to become a nun. She wrote about the, quote, mother wounds that she was told caused her to become gay. On the outside, however, Alana began to show marked mood and behavioral changes. She began to cut and self-harm, carving the word defiled into her upper left arm. She was hospitalized twice for suicidality. As a mother, Alana's depression woke me up to the deep shame and pain she was carrying, and we used all our means to find inpatient programs to help her recover. But all of this was not enough. On December 9th, 2019, we lost Alana to suicide. The devastation to our family and communities has been unspeakable. The official denials from the Archdiocese and silence from those who mentored Alana have added salt to our weeping wounds. Many church leaders know that Alana's experience was not consistent with official church teaching, but remain confused when psychologically damaging approaches appear under the guise of orthodoxy. This is why the law is protective. It dissuades future teens from pursuing discredited practices, especially in contexts where mentors and counselors are not properly trained. I cry out to God every day, not only for the loss of Alana, but for the destruction that conversion therapy causes to the most sacred of relationships, the relationship between a child and their parents, between a child and God, and between a child and herself. Shortly before Alana died, she gave an interview with the Denver Post. Quote, I think the church's counsel is what led me to be hospitalized. I was feeling so much shame that I was comforted by the thought of hurting myself. I've now basically completely lost my faith. I don't know what I believe about God, but I think if there is a God, he doesn't need me talking to him anymore. I urge you to uphold Colorado's minor conversion therapy law.
Yeah, Alana's story, like, I haven't listened to it anytime recently. I've listened to it all the way through once, and it, like, was so...
Yeah.
I think like we both like we saw so much of ourselves in it, I think. I mean, I particularly like saw so much of myself in it coming from kind of a similar background of nominally Catholic parents, get very deep into the church. I didn't undergo conversion therapy, and I honestly feel like almost lucky that I just wasn't aware of it took me a while to come into the self-acceptance of the fact that was like even what I was experiencing. I'm almost kind of grateful that I was in denial of that for the period of time that I was. Yeah, I mean, powerful.
So, I think that's all to say about the Supreme Court case, Chiles v. Salazar. Like I said, the oral arguments are coming up this week, so we'll see. But then, like, we might have to wait like 9 months for the
decision is going to be a long way out from the oral arguments.
So I'm just hoping, because I think, like, from a legal standpoint, to me, the law makes sense, but I happen to also agree that conversion therapy is bad and that it's perfectly fine to be gay. So I can see how it can be hard, I don't know. I think our discussions are so polarized now that I see the legislation as like a nuanced middle ground. And I just hope that like people can really think about it instead of just hearing conversion therapy, gay, trans.
Yeah, I think it's one of those
make
like
a decision based on where they think they fall.
Culture wars that are so entrenched where it's just there's like a gut reaction to hearing like key phrases. But I mean, obviously, again, like we're very honest about the standpoint we come from on this. Like neither of us thinks that being gay is wrong. Both of us have left the Catholic faith of our upbringing behind. So, you know, like that is the angle we're coming from. But there's a lot of things that I have opinions about church teaching that I wouldn't be sitting here saying, I think you can be an Orthodox Catholic and believe this.
Right.
But this, I feel, is very, it's separate
I
and
hope
distinct
we were able
entirely.
to kind of show how even as an Orthodox Catholic, like you can...
Or Christian, honestly.
Or Christian, right? Like
I just don't think this is incompatible with faith, free speech, freedom of religion. Everyone in America is feeling this tension that is existing politically right now. And I think that a lot of people want there to be able to be more genuine dialogue. But I think that a lot of us are just like struggling with that because the stakes feel so high. And so I kind of hope this was able to cool the temperature of that a little bit and be like, this is, we can talk about this rationally. And so if for anyone who listened to this, like I would be really curious to hear about your thoughts on this and like wherever you fall on the spectrum. Like I would be curious to hear if there's anyone who is like an Orthodox member of the Catholic Church who's listening through to this and like how this resonated with you. Like I would love to hear your feedback. I'd love to kind of engage in some dialogue around this because I think this is one of those things where the culture wars are kind of being politically weaponized and fear is being politically weaponized. And I'd love for us to I understand that religious individuals and therapists like Kaylee Chiles, for example, who feel like they might be impacted by this legislation, like they're feeling fear on that front. Obviously, as a queer individual who grew up deeply in the faith, like I'm feeling a lot of fear, not for myself, but for other like vulnerable, So obviously it's like, I understand there's a lot of fear and tension going on here right now. And it's very difficult to have rational conversations when you feel like this is like a fight or flight type of thing. Yeah. But I would love to kind of be able to like throw this out here and have this be like an opening point for some dialogue around this. Yeah. Because I think it's just conversations that need to be had. These are kind of new.
And there's like a lot like this was only like I was trying to cover as much ground as possible, which meant that I like couldn't present absolutely everything. There's more to the legislation. You know, I just looked at the definitions. I only like read you part of one of the briefs from one side.
Right.
Like,
obviously there's so much. Also, it's just like
dozens of briefs, dozens of like stuff online. So like there's more to the case. And I think there's like more arguments or objections that people on both sides might have or concerns that we didn't address. And
so I mean, like if there's a sticking point to you that like is not something we talked about, obviously also we're just like all citizens in the United States. We have a little bit of a civic duty to have involvement in this stuff. But I also get that it's not always very comprehensible. Like if you go click on like the website, like I'm not discouraging you from reading it for yourself. Please go do so. I'm always very big on that. I'm always very big on like, okay, like go actually like read this. But there is should we tie it back to scripture? It's like one of those things where it's like you kind of do have to have a little bit of background and understanding on what you're reading. And be able to place it within its context. So again, like please go read it, share your thoughts. Like I just want to let's chat about this. So thank you for tuning in to this conversation. We're so happy to have had you here. Just a little bit of housekeeping here at the end, I suppose. Feel free to give us a follow over Leave Laugh Love Pod on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube now to stay up to date. We are on now we're on YouTube. We're on Spotify, Apple, Amazon, wherever you listen to your podcasts. And we recently launched a Patreon. If you are watching the video form of this, you may notice we're in a beautiful set. And if you want to kind of help us continue to develop this kind of content and this kind of work that we've really been trying to dig into, feel free to give us a little subscribe over at patreon.com/leave-laugh-love-pod. Is it Leave Laugh Love Pod or Leave Laugh Love?
I don't actually remember.
Okay, we'll link it in the show notes. But yeah, and until next week, keep living, laughing, and loving.
Bye.
Bye.